Good evening, everybody. I am Dr. Monimala Mistro. Welcome all of you in this August gathering. It's a great privilege for all of us to have such a distinguished speaker, Dr. Joy Bhattacharya, in this evening. Let me introduce him. Dr. Joy Bhattacharya completed his PhD degree in 1989 for his thesis on Naya theory of individual self under the able guidance of late Pandit Vishwabandhu Bhattacharya as a UGC research fellow from the Department of Philosophy, Jadavpur University. Since 1991, he has been associated with the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, Golpark, teaching Indian philosophy in different courses of the institute, including the UNESCO-approved Human Unity courses of IUHU. As a guest lecturer, he taught philosophy in different institutions, including Bhattacharyya University, RK Mission Residential College, Narendrapur, Mahestala College, Muralidhar Girls College, etc. His thesis was published in book form by Sanskrit Pustak Bhavan. Shaptodorthi of Shivaditya, edited by Dr. Bhattacharya, was brought to light by RMIC publication section. Besides this, many articles on philosophical problems have also been published in various journals in Bengali and English, including RMIC Bulletin. Now, it's my humble request to Dr. Bhattacharya to start his presentation. Dr. Bhattacharya, please start.
Thank you. At the very outset, I would certainly convey my best wishes to all of you present here. Mr. Modak, Dr. Gargide, and so many other persons, Monimala. So you see that in our life, in human life, cognition takes a very important role, and there cannot be doubt about it. You see, but for cognition, we are certainly in the dark about other things in the world and even ourselves. Now, we can have desire, aversion, etc. Let us suppose we are desirous of something. I am desirous of Tagore songs sung by Debabrata Vishwas. Let us suppose. But this desire presupposes cognition. But for a cognition, we cannot have even a desire, even an aversion, etc. For this reason, we must admit that cognition is a very, very serious problem, serious issue in our life. Here, I will try to consider cognition from the psychological point of view. And this is quite a significant point to be made clear. for the sake of a precise understanding of the problem, of the approach, namely the psychological approach, we would first say a few words about psychology. Before all this, I would like to request you to keep this point in mind that in this discussion, I will try to provide you with the bird's eye view of the problem. It is obviously impossible for me to do justice completely to the subject. However, why do we call this psychological approach? In order to understand this point, we are needed to understand what psychology means. You see that the word psychology owes its origin to the Greek words, namely psyche and logos. Psyche means the mind or self, and logos means the science. The psychology literally means science of the mind, science of the mind or self. In this connection, I would tell you one thing, that mind should not be confused with manas, M-A-N-A-S, manas. When we talk about mind in psychology, we do refer to the self instead of manas. We all know that in Bengali we say monovidya, monovigyan. But here manas stands for the self. So we may say that psychology is science of the self. Now you see that psychology as a science of self is indeed an empirical science. It is an empirical science in the sense that in psychology, we have got a definite method of perceiving inner life, inner things. So this is therefore the empirical study, empirical science. Just as we have physics, in physics there is an empirical study of the physical things. Similarly, psychology is an empirical science, a positive science, and it is not to be confused with the philosophy of the mind. Philosophy of the mind is something different, and psychology as a study is an empirical study of the mind without any inner speculation, as we do in the domain of philosophy of mind. Now, what I actually mean to say is that insofar as cognition is concerned, our approach is a psychological approach for the simple reason that this cognition taking place within the self, taking place within the mind, can be observed, internal observation, internal perception, inner perception. So, this point has to be kept into the mind that cognition is being dealt with here from the psychological point of view, which is above all an empirical science based on observation and experiment. Insofar as the particular method of psychology is concerned, we have got introspection, antardarsana. I will try to discuss cognition from this point of view. Why do I do that? You see that cognition, as it can be empirically studied, it occurs in our day-to-day life. It occurs in our day-to-day life. And we can very well cognize objects in this fashion, this object and that object. Thus, we see that our cognitions are necessarily cognitions of some this or that object. Cognition of this or that object. This point is very important, right? Why? You see that there are certain philosophical systems in the domain of Indian philosophy that talk about pure consciousness, pure knowledge. Here we are certainly reminded of Advaita Vedanta, as our friends may very well remember, Advaita Vedanta. In Advaita Vedanta, which is associated with the very name of Shankaracharya, we find that there is the idea of pure consciousness. He says Chit, consciousness, Chaitanya, Chit. English, consciousness, cognition, whatever it may be. Now, this pure consciousness is something that does not fall within the scope of psychological studies. Why? Psychology, as I have just told you, is after all an empirical science. And from the psychological point of view, all our cognitions are intentional. That is to say, all our cognitions refer to this or that object. But insofar as pure consciousness is concerned, it is pure in the sense that it is objectless. This is the Advaita point. This is the Advaita thought. Pure in the sense that this consciousness, this is such that it does not refer to any object. But you see that pure consciousness cannot be experienced by us that way. What is our experience regarding knowledge or cognition? It is our everyday experience that we cognize this or that object. Let us exemplify this point. When you say, I know or I cognize, then the obvious question raised is, what do you know? What do you cognize? He will say, by way of an answer, he will say, yes, I know a jar, I know a pot, or something like that. So, all our cognitions are necessarily cognitions of certain things, of certain objects, outer or inner. Yes, inner objects can very well be there. I will explain later on. But the point I want to emphasize is that cognitions are, when cognitions are cognitions of certain objects, then those cognitions fall within the scope of psychological studies. Psychology is, after all, an empirical science. From the standpoint of empirical point of view, we say that I cognize a jar, I know a jar, I know a cloth, I know the spectacles, and so on and so forth. In each and every case, we have got certain objects cognized. In this connection, I will be very happy to mention a very famous definition of a cognition in the celebrated Now system. You know very well that in the domain of Indian philosophy, we have got the Now system, very important systems, allied systems. Now, cognition is there termed as buddhi. Buddhi. Buddhi should not be confused with intelligence. Buddhi. Buddhi stands for cognition. What is the definition of a cognition? What is the definition of a buddhi? We find that in Tarka Kaumudi of Logakhi Bhaskara, Tarka Kaumudi of Logakhi Bhaskara, we have got a very good definition of cognition. Artha prakasho buddhi. Artha prakasho buddhi. What is that? Artha here means an object, such as a jar or a pot or a ring. Artha prakasho. Artha or such some object, the pot, the jar, manifestation or revelation of an object, manifestation, prakasha, of an object, such as a jar, is called buddhi. Buddhi or cognition is defined here in terms of manifestation of an object. It is clear that all our cognitions, without exception, are necessarily cognitions of this or that object. Maybe the outer object, such as the book, or maybe the inner object, such as my pleasure or happiness. But some object is there. It is a firm conviction of the neo-Boishetico thinkers that all our cognitions are cognitions of certain objects. Thus, they refuse to accept the Advaita idea of pure consciousness. I have just told you that by the pure consciousness, Advaita means consciousness objectless. But the Noyayika argues that whenever we talk about a cognition, we do talk about cognition of some object, this or that object. We do not actually find any case where there is pure consciousness or pure cognition. Artha prakasho buddhi. Very important point to be considered here is that the object is not at all a creation of the cognition. You see that in the idealist school, Eastern or Western, in the Eastern philosophy, in the domain of Indian philosophy, we have got the Buddhist school called Yogacar. No, this school, being an idealist school, thinks that object of knowledge is, object of cognition is creation of the cognition itself. No, this is not the idea. This is a realistic approach. This is a realistic approach. They say that cognition is necessarily cognition of some object, and the object is revealed. It is not created by the object, by the cognition. Let us exemplify this point. You see that in this room, we have got pieces of furniture. Some time back, some months ago, my pen to write with is not being found. It is there under the almirah. It is there under the almirah. I do not cognize the object. Since I do not cognize the object, I am not at all able to write anything with the pen. The pen is there, but I am not aware of it. Occasion arises when I come to know, oh yes, my pen is there under the almirah. My pen is there in the pocket. My pen is there in the drawer. The pen, the object is there without being known. It can very well be there. but it is revealed to me when I cognize it. When I cognize the pen, then only I am in a position to use the pen to write something with. So the object is there. It is not the creation of cognition. What does the cognition do? The cognition reveals, manifests the object. Hence, we are told that artha prakasho buddhi. One point I should also mention. I have chosen the word cognition instead of knowledge. There is a point why I do it. In the domain of Western philosophy, knowledge is necessarily true knowledge. Knowledge is necessarily true knowledge. Here we are certainly reminded of the great Greek philosopher, namely Plato. Plato, the great thinker. He defines knowledge in terms of infallibility. In terms of infallibility, knowledge is necessarily true. Knowledge is necessarily true. But you see that this is the Western thought about knowledge. But you see that in the domain of Indian philosophy, whenever we make a psychological approach, we find that knowledge is true, or knowledge may also be false. For the Westerners, false knowledge is a contradictory term. If something is knowledge, then it is necessarily true, true knowledge. He says, no, when you say knowledge, you are not needed to say true knowledge, because knowledge is necessarily true. But in the Indian philosophy, particularly in Neo-Asia, we are taking into consideration this buddhi, this jnana may be true, yatharthanubhava may also be false. Having kept this point in mind, I have used the word cognition in the broad sense. Because if I use the word knowledge, then I should be restricted to true knowledge. But you see that there are false cognitions also, false knowledges also. So after having avoided this idea, this term knowledge, I have chosen cognition. I cognize an object. A cognition may be true or false. So we are now going to give you a very significant point with particular reference to Gautama's Naya Sutra 1.1.15, that is to say, Sutra 15, occurring in the first section, in the first chapter of Naya. He says, Buddhi Rupalabdhir Jnanam iti anarthantaram. Buddhi Rupalabdhir Jnanam iti anarthantaram. That is to say, Buddhi or cognition, Upalabdhi, consciousness, Buddhi, Upalabdhi, Jnana, cognition, these are all synonyms. That is to say, instead of cognition, you may very well say consciousness, awareness, etc. Whatever it may be, consciousness or cognition, it is experienced by us, it is known by us as being consciousness or cognition of some object. Pure consciousness, no, that actually falls outside the scope of our psychological studies. Psychology, as I told you, is an empirical science. And as an empirical science, psychology is certainly interested in cognition of this or that object. Cognition of the jar, cognition of the pot, and so forth. This cognition may be true or false, that is something different. Now, one point may be discussed in short. Yes, we are talking about cognition of a jar. But how do we cognize a cognition? We are talking about cognition of a jar or a table or a pen. But how do we cognize the object, cognize the cognition itself? Cognition of cognition is undoubtedly a very serious and interesting problem. I would tell you something about this problem, cognition of cognition, with particular reference to certain systems. You see that in the Bhatta school of Mimamsa system, we know, is a very important system in the domain of Indian philosophy. And this Mimamsa system, ascribable to Kumarilo Bhatto Mimamsa, we have a very interesting thought about cognition of cognition. How do we cognize a cognition? It's a firm conviction of the Bhatta school of Mimamsa that a cognition is inferred on the basis of knownness of the object. Kyatota lingok anumana. What is that? A fruit is there. A fruit is there, an apple. It is cognized, and the fruit is therefore characterized by some feature called knownness. Knownness. The fruit is known. The fruit is known. Known. This knownness of the fruit, the object, makes us infer cognition. They give a good example. I will try to. You go to the market and purchase some vegetables, and you return home. Then you take bath, etc., etc. After having taken bath, you go to the table, dinner table, and you find that palatable dishes are served. Certain dishes are served for you. You have not gone to the kitchen. You have not seen anyone cooking or preparing, but the dishes are served. On the basis of these dishes served, you know that vegetables purchased by you from the market were cooked. In this fashion, the object, the apple, is known. On the basis of its being known, we infer cognition. This is the position. But you see that this position has been discarded by the now Bhattacharyya psychology. They are of the opinion that this is not a fact at all, that we infer cognition. No. There is obviously a point of inference, but the most important fact is that we have a direct awareness of our cognition. Aham janami, I know. You see, when you know the jar, the table, the object is known to you. And you have a cognition of the form, I know a jar. Ghatam aham janami, I know a jar. Ghatam aham janami. This cognition occurs within the self. This cognition occurs within the self. There is manas, the inner sense. This inner sense, manas, has got the inner perception of your cognition, that I know a jar. Aham, ghatam aham janami. This cognition of cognition is a mental perception, manasya pratyaksha, mental perception which is technically known as Anuvyavasaya. It is known as Anuvyavasaya. Anu means afterwards, posterior to Vyavasaya, cognition. Cognition after cognition. Anuvyavasaya. And this is an inner perception. This is not an inference. This is not an inference. So, when we cognize a cognition, we have got inner perception of the cognition. But one point should be made clear. Otherwise, there will be incomplete. That will be incomplete. What is that? In the neuropsychology, when we have a psychological approach towards cognition, we find that one kind of cognition is pratyaksha, perception, perceptual cognition. Perceptual cognition. For example, I look at the wall and I perceive the wall having certain color, etc., etc. This perception is the outer perception with the help of the sense of sight. You see that these perceptions are either indeterminate, nirvikalpaka, or determinate, savikalpaka. Indeterminate or determinate, nirvikalpaka, savikalpaka. Nirvikalpaka perception, nirvikalpaka is a bare awareness of some object, and this may be called sensation. In Western psychology, we call it sensation. This is bare awareness of some object. At the first moment, you get a vague awareness, a bare awareness of what is that? Oh, some mosquito is there. Yes. Now you kill it. At the first moment, you have got the bare awareness of the mosquito sitting on your leg. This bare awareness, nirvikalpaka pratyaksha, this bare awareness is inferred on certain grounds. But afterwards, you have got the, say, determinate perceptions, savikalpaka pratyaksha. Oh, this is a mosquito. It bites me. Yes, I kill it now. So this determinate perception of the mosquito is perceptible by the inner sense called manas. I know that this is a mosquito. I know some mosquito sitting on my leg, etc. But insofar as the indeterminate perception is concerned, sensation is concerned, we infer it as the basis of our, say, determinate cognition. So the point that I try to make is that a cognition is cognized. A cognition is cognized by manas And this is the inner perception of a cognition called Anuvyavasaya. And there is also the their awareness, sensation of an object. This their awareness is inferred. What does the Bhatta say? All our cognitions are inferred based on the characteristic feature of knownness ascribable to the object. No, Lojaiko does not say that. Another point should also be taken into consideration. And what is that? Advaita school holds that knowledge or Chaitanya consciousness is self-manifest, Shaprakasha, self-manifestation of cognition. They argue that if cognition is cognized by subsequent cognition, then that subsequent cognition should also be cognized by another cognition and by another cognition. No, this process leads to infinite regress. No, this is not admissible. But the Nyaika, the now psychology points out that whatever is there in this world, including cognition, is Svatirikto Prakashako Prakashya. That is to say, whatever is there in this object, in this world, can be known, can be cognized by something else, not by itself. Svatirikto Prakashako Prakashya. The lamp is there. It is burning, it gives light, and I am asleep. I shut my eyes. I do not see the lamp. Light. Light is cognized by me when I perceive it. Light is perceived, is known. Light is not perception. So light is known by perception, which is not light. Svatirikto Prakashako Prakasha. Similarly, a cognition cannot also be self-revealing. A cognition cannot also be self-manifest. Nothing in this world is self-manifest. Nothing is capable of self-manifestation. A cognition is cognized in two ways. One, a cognition is cognized when it is a determinate cognition, such as a Savikalpaka Pratyaksha. We have got the inner perception by the manas, and that is technically known as Anuvyavasaya. And there is, when there is the Nidvikalpaka or the indeterminate perception, we have got the inference. We have to infer it. So in no way a cognition is cognized by itself. The objection raised by the opponent does not stand to reason. Why? Because this is Vastu Sthiti, that is to say, This is the fact. I look at the book is cognized by me, and that's all. I may have the inner perception, namely, I know that this is a book, and then there is no scope of I know that. No, yet we come to the end. So, in the neuropsychology, we are told that all our cognitions are necessarily cognitions of some this or that object. There cannot be pure cognition or pure consciousness. All our cognitions do refer to some objects. But for an object, we cannot have cognitions. Our cognitions do not create the object cognized. Yes, this is a very important point. This is a realistic approach. Whenever we have an erroneous cognition, the snake rope illusion, the snake perceived, the false perception of the snake, it does not even create the snake, because the reason is that the snake cognized here instead of the rope is certainly there in the forest. Is certainly there in the forest. I have already cognized the snake there. If I don't have any knowledge of the snake, I cannot even have a false knowledge, a false cognition of the snake. So the snake is there in the bush, in the bushes, in the forest. I have seen it in the past. And now, instead of the rope, I perceive a snake, and that is obviously a false perception. But some object is there, and that object is not also created by cognition. So, I have tried in my own humble way to discuss certain points available in neuropsychology. I have tried to make an approach towards cognition from the psychological point of view, and in this connection, I did also take into consideration certain other philosophical systems, and this all for me. Should I stop now?
No, you can take 10 to 15 minutes also.
You can continue little bit. Abruptly, you are just concluding. Why? Please continue.
Is the thing clear?
20 minutes you can take. We are enjoying.
What I tried to. Do you like it or not?
Definitely, we are really enjoying.
Okay. However, so by way of a concluding remark, I may tell you something more. This cognition, consciousness, what we talk about from the psychological point of view, this occurs as a special quality, Vishesha Guna, in the self, the mind. But there is a very serious point to be considered. What is that? The self associated with the physical body can be qualified by cognition. That is to say, a self which is dissociated from the physical body, the body, Sharira, does not have a cognition. Does not have a cognition. The physical body, Sharira, it has got a very important role. A self associated with, conjoined with, I should say, the physical body can alone have cognitions. This is a very important point. Thus, this is the reason why the physical body is defined in terms of bhogayotanam, shariram bhogayotanam. What is this physical body? This physical body is bhoger ayatana. Obviously, cognition takes place in the self. There's no doubt about it. The Noyayika neuropsychology does not go to tell us that that cognition is there in the physical body. But the point is accepted. The point accepted by the Noyayika is that the self associated with or conjoined with the physical body, Sharira, can alone have cognition. Not only cognition, but other qualities such as pleasure, pain, etc. etc. Shariram bhogayotanam, bhogo buddhi. Bhogo buddhi. Buddhi means jnana. Buddhi means cognition. So we are told that the physical body, the embodied self, the embodied self alone can be qualified by a cognition. A self not associated, not conjoined with the physical body cannot have a cognition. The Dvaiyika therefore tells us that insofar as the individual self associated with the body is concerned, he can be the cognizer, he or she can be the cognizer. And there are countless cognizers, countless individual selves. Neuropsychology is convinced enough that there are innumerable selves. There are innumerable selves. Bahutta. They believe in plurality of selves. How do they say? What do they say? What do they mean to say? Let us suppose at this present moment, I have a cognition of presence of jar on the floor. At the same moment, another person in another room has cognition of absence of the jar on the floor. I cognize presence of jar at the moment when another person cognizes absence of jar. Presence and absence, bhavo and abhava, these are two. Padartha dividha bhavascha abhavashriti. These are two. Bhava, presence of the jar on the floor. I cognize it. At the same moment, another person in another room cognizes absence of a jar on the floor. The self must be two. The knower, the cognizer must be two. One cognizes presence and the other cognizes absence. I am fond of Tagore songs. I get happy, I get pleasure through the song sung by Devobrato or Hemant Varsan. Another person may very well be there, not liking Tagore songs. So, yes, I don't like it. The moment when I am happy, another person disliking Tagore songs is unhappy. Happy and unhappy. Sukha and dukkha. These are two different. They cannot take place in oneself at the same moment. So oneself is happy and the other self at the same moment is unhappy. Sukha, dukkha. In this way, our cognitions, different cognitions, our pleasures, our pains, etc., or everything are different. Since all this occurs in the individual self or mind, plurality of selves must be accepted. This is a firm conviction of the neuropsychology. You see that so many things are there. I have just tried to give you, in a nutshell, an idea, some thought, and that's all for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is wonderful session, and special thanks for that. Only you manage the time. For a long time we are trying to get you, so today you are with us. So this is really wonderful session. And also thank you very much all the participants, as well as today's anchor Monimala, Dr. Monimala Mr.
Yes, she is very much